guess while we wait for some more people to join in, I would like to welcome everybody to the webinar, and I want to remind everybody about the foundation and the work we do. I would like to welcome all of you guys to participate in some of our support groups that we have in place virtually. There are a series. There's a parent and caregiver support group. We have an adult support group. We have a Spanish support group. And I welcome everybody to visit our website, www.epilepsynorcal.org, for information about all our therapy programs, support groups, events, awareness events that we have going pretty much all the time. We don't have a physical place. We are operating virtually for a while, which actually has been helpful to be able to reach out to a lot more people in our community. So I'm also posting there the Epilepsy Foundation, the national 24/7 hotline, and then also the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That is important for us to know. There's a reason why we're all here, and I'm so glad you guys are taking the initiative to talk about health and how the last year and everything happened the last year and how it has affected us all. So I'm very glad to see you guys taking the initiative to learn and educate yourself, which is a critical part of the epilepsy journey, to take leadership over your journey and come with the help of your health provider, your community, your family. And I want to remind you all that we are here for you, that we offer a lot of support group, a lot of programs, like educational programs. We offer seizure first aid training for you, your family, your organization, free of charge. And we always here. You can email us or call us if you want to share you have some questions, or if there's anything that maybe we can help you with. That's why we're here, and we look forward to help you as much as we can. So it's 10:05. I'm gonna introduce you to Dr. Nancy Liu. We're very, very lucky to have somebody like her helping us in this webinar. Dr. Nancy Liu is an assistant clinical professor at UC Berkeley, where she's the director of the Psychology Clinic and Center for Assessment, and trains graduate students in delivering evidence-based treatments for mental health concerns. In the past, she has been a clinical faculty member at UCSF and a consultant with the World Health Organization. And Nancy has special focus on depression, anxiety, and trauma. Thank you so much for being here, Nancy.
Thank you, Carlos. Should I go ahead and?
Yeah, I'm gonna make you host.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop the share and make you host, and you can take it from here, okay?
Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, got it. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my slides real quickly. Can everyone see that okay? Good. Okay, great. Thank you. And I can only see a couple of boxes, so I'm going to rely on you all for thumbs up or thumbs down if anything happens. But first of all, thank you so much for being here, and good morning. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning, a beautiful spring morning, talking about this. I want to add, first of all, too, that I'm not an epilepsy expert.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm okay.
I think there's somebody. All right. All right. Well, I was just going to add, I'm not an epilepsy expert, but I do work a lot with depression and anxiety. And so I'm hoping today that you'll walk away with some of the skills and the tools that I would say we teach our clients, but also all of us, use ourselves as well. I think everyone can benefit from some of these CBT skills. I also wanted to highlight, in preparing for this, I spoke with Pali Palamadesi, who was really helpful in just sharing about her firsthand experiences with epilepsy, and was just really just a valuable, resource about, her own lived experiences. And so I just wanted to acknowledge her. She had also written this wonderful book. The four-letter word here was fear. And so she talks a lot about her experiences. And I actually think some of the things she was talking about in her book actually fall in line with some of the CBT skills that I'll be talking about today. So I just want to acknowledge these as kind of common wisdom skills too. So things that can help anybody. Just another thing too that I had consulted in preparing for this was this is a really nice workbook. It's meant to be used in with a clinician, but just a really helpful tool too, and just a set of resources that we use in our clinic as well. So I just want to highlight that. And I liked one of the quotes in here that often the fear of having a seizure does more harm than the seizures themselves. And also that the vast majority of people with seizures are able to lead full and active lives. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the things that lead to that today. So the things I want to cover are, what is depression? What is anxiety? When we're talking about it from a clinical standpoint, what does that mean? When do we know that maybe we're concerned or worried about it in ourselves or in other people? And then what is CBT, cognitive behavioral? What are some of those skills? And we'll be talking about some of that. So hopefully by the end, you'll know some of these things quite well. So what is depression? What is anxiety? Depression and anxiety, they're often comorbid. So when we talk about them, we usually don't think of them. Sometimes we think about them as separate things, but oftentimes, about 85% of the time, they're actually quite comorbid and come together. So people experiencing depression also experience anxiety and vice versa. About up to half of people with epilepsy report depression and anxiety in a clinically significant way. And if we were all together in a room, I would ask you just to look around, or maybe you want to look around at the chat boxes and just count off every other person, you know, and imagine that experience of depression and anxiety and how common it is. Also, this is just common in the world, depression and anxiety. Depression is the leading cause of disability in the world. Depression and anxiety are known as the most common mental disorders, the CMDs we call them. And in the US, about the lifetime prevalence is about 20 to 30% of people in their lifetimes will experience clinically significant depression and anxiety. So I like to ask people to think about the next time you're at the grocery store, just think about the people, count off 1 in 5 people, 1 in 3 people having in their lifetime experienced depression and anxiety in a clinically significant way. So these are very common conditions. And also they're common in low income countries as well. People often think about this as sort of the, you know, problems that are common among the wealthy, but actually in some of the low income countries, many of the low income countries, they're increasingly common and are very common as well and very burdensome. I also like to highlight that anybody can be afflicted with depression and anxiety. It doesn't matter how rich, how beautiful, how talented, how skilled, what race or ethnicity. And these are just some of the common stars that you may or may not, maybe some of you already know, have struggled with depression and anxiety. Adele, Kendrick Lamar. I think this is a model who wears a lot of fancy watches. I don't know some of these people. K-pop stars. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, Maori, also has talked about openly his struggles with depression. Chrissy Teigen, Prince Harry, I worried about putting him up here. I think everyone's thinking about the Oprah interview. And recently Prince Philip, unfortunately, but these people have been really open about their struggles with depression and anxiety. So just again to highlight, it can affect anybody, no matter how rich, famous, talented, and a lot of people are really struggling with this. So let's talk a little bit about clinically, what do we mean by depression? How might we recognize it in ourselves and other people? And that gets to the question of what's normal and what's abnormal sadness. And the things to keep in mind with any of the mental disorders, we're really talking about common experiences that, you know, I think of there's a normal distribution of everybody will get sad in their lives. It's just a common experience. Everyone will feel sadness. Everyone will feel grief. Everyone will experience loss. And sadness is a normal part of just our experiences. But there's a point at which maybe it's a little bit too much or too long or too serious. And that's when we're talking about clinically significant depression and anxiety. So this normal distribution, just imagine many people experiencing depression. It looks a certain way, it lasts for a certain amount of time. But then there's this extreme part where maybe it's really impacting people in this very severe way. That's when we're talking about clinically significant depression and anxiety. So this is that idea of categorical versus continuous, that this is something something that is continuous. It's not you have it or you don't. It's just to what degree are you having it, these very common experiences of sadness and depression. And when we're talking about clinically significant depression or anxiety, we're talking about two major parts to give an official diagnosis. We're looking at a cluster of symptoms that look a certain way, last a certain amount of time, and also this kind of distress or decline in functioning, that one's livelihood is really impacted. Their ability to function in daily life, engage in daily activities are significantly impacted. That's when we're talking about clinically significant depression. Some of the common symptoms include loss of pleasure, sadness, guilt, reduced concentration, hopelessness, thoughts of death or suicide, changes in appetite or sleep. But remember, it's not just these experiences alone, it's also accompanied by some kind of impact in one's functioning, changes in daily life. And I just wanted to show a couple of examples of measures people might give to screen for depression. And we see these symptoms, these common symptoms that generally hang together. But we're also looking at this distress or decline in functioning, that there really is an impact on one's life. We're usually thinking about a duration of 2 weeks or more where it's consistently felt this way and these symptoms are there or present. And again, keeping in mind that everyone, especially during COVID, has been experiencing distress, has not been sleeping very well, has had a hard time concentrating, is tired of Zoom. So keeping in mind the sort of what's normal, what's abnormal distinction. We know too that in epilepsy, there's an atypical type of depression. We sort of have a different way that some of the depressive symptoms might look. And so there are these specific measures that also try to screen for that and recognize those pieces. Anxiety, we talked about how depression and anxiety are often comorbid. Anxiety, when we're talking about that, we're talking about fear and worry. And also similarly, there's the question of what is normal, what is abnormal. And again, keeping in mind that anxiety is just a part of human life. Everyone will experience fear and worry in their lives. It can also be useful at many times. But again, keeping in mind that normal distribution, there's a time at which it might be too much or too excessive, and it's impacting somebody's life. And so again, that's when we're talking about clinically significant anxiety. So keeping in mind, again, this continuous idea, and we're really only looking at a certain subset of people that have an anxiety that persists and really impacts one's functioning in a very negative way. So again, we go back to this idea of clinically significant. We're looking at a couple of anxious symptoms, fears that hang together, but also this impact in functioning, and one's livelihood is really affected and impacted where one can't engage in normal activities the way they could beforehand. And a common measure that we use is the GAD-7, looking at generalized anxiety. Again, some of these symptoms that hang together, plus again, this impact in functioning that's really impacting somebody's life, and it lasts for a certain amount of time. Usually when we're looking at 2 weeks or more where it's persistent, then we're starting to wonder if it may be clinically significant. But again, keeping in mind that there's a normal distribution, everybody experiences sadness, everybody experiences fear and worry. And COVID has been really hard for all of us. And, we're past a year mark now. Everyone's tired, everyone's Zoom fatigued, and everyone's, cautiously optimistic or maybe still kind of pessimistic about the future. We're just not sure. There's this uncertainty that we've been sitting in for so long. And if you've been feeling some of the stress or the toll of the way COVID has been impacting everybody, you're definitely not alone. There have been tons of news articles talking about a second pandemic, a mental health pandemic, after COVID or during COVID that's coinciding because a lot of people really are stressed. This is an article highlighting that a third of Americans, this was in the summer, feeling severe anxiety. Most people experiencing that the pandemic had affected their mental health in a negative way. Some people experiencing also trauma, as we've been sort of pummeled with lots of losses and experiences. Healthcare workers, we know there's a huge concern of certain subsets of the population. So a lot of people are really struggling. It is a hard time. And so just remembering that as well. Crisis lights have gone up. I think it was 860%, some sort of, crazy number. But, calls to crisis hotlines, everyone is really stressed out, has been stressed out. And we continue to see rises in suicide, rises in other kinds of self-harm and more crisis behaviors. And at this time in the pandemic, a lot of people are also experiencing anxiety and distress about going back to whatever life was like before. A lot of people don't want to go back, or maybe they've been used to not having to commute, or things looking a little bit slower, eating lunch at home. And so there's that piece too, these transitions. It's just been a hard time and continues to be so as we move forward. All right, so that's depression and anxiety. Hopefully you're not feeling too depressed and anxious after talking about all of that. Let's talk a little bit more about what we can do, or what are some of the skills that help people manage. So I'm going to talk a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy and just some of the skills. Again, these are skills that you see in self-help books and some of these articles that have come out to help with managing it. It's an evidence-based treatment for depression and anxiety. A lot of people really highlight it as one of the first-line treatments, but I just want to share with you a little bit about what it is and the skills that we use when we're working with people with depression and anxiety. So first of all, when we talk about depression and anxiety, we first have to know how we're understanding it. And we usually talk about this from a biopsychosocial conceptualization, meaning there are biological influences of depression and anxiety. We know there's a certain physiological difference, a neurobiological stress response that influences these symptoms. Some people may have a predisposition towards that physiological difference. It may have been inherited. It may be affected by so many things. There are also psychological influences. We know that cognitive appraisals, or the way that we look at and understand events, impact the way we feel and our mood. We know that the things that we do, behaviors, the things that we're doing everyday, activities, also impact our mood. We know that social support plays a huge role in our ability to feel good about ourselves, to just feel like life is worth living for. So we know that psychological influences impact depression and anxiety. And for that social part of biopsychosocial, we know there are sociocultural influences too. These might be societal pressures, cultural perfectionism. We're a society, American culture is really focused on productivity, and if you were on social media during COVID, everyone was baking bread or trying to get fit or is supposed to write that great American novel or whatever it might be. But there are these pressures, and I think that's part of culture in some way. So we know that all of these things together influence depression and anxiety. And so our treatments, or the ways that we address it, should follow accordingly. So because there is this biological piece, we look at psychotropic medications. For the psychological influences, we're looking at cognitive behavioral skills, the ones that we'll be talking about today. And then for these sociocultural influences, there have been many more of these media campaigns. I think of that those Dove commercials about sort of, body image and having, quote unquote, more normal images. And so some of those things to help address some of these larger sociocultural influences. We're not going to talk about all of them. We're just going to focus a little bit on these CBT skills and talk a little bit more about what those look like. So the main idea behind CBT is that our thoughts and behaviors, we can all experience the same situations, but the way we think about them and the way we engage or act really has an impact on how we feel. So if we look at that first panel, if we look at both panels, we see it's the same situation. It's raining. But we see in the first panel that the second box, the person might be thinking something like, oh, it's raining. I forgot my umbrella. I always forget my umbrella. I'm so stupid. Why do I always do that? And then we see this larger outcome where, they're covering their head with this book or newspaper, and miserable, we can likely assume, all the way home. In the second panel, it's also raining. But maybe there's a different thought. Maybe it's something like, oh, we've been in a drought for a long time. We really need this rain. Or I don't have to water my flowers today. The sky is doing that for me today. I get to enjoy a little bit of extra time, maybe watch some TV. And then we see this larger outcome, maybe they're hippie, running out, dancing in the rain, whatever it might be. But again, same situation, but the different thoughts and the different behaviors lead to a different mood. So that's the basic premise, a really simple idea, but also powerful in other ways. So again, said another way, situation can impact our thoughts. Those thoughts can impact our behaviors. Those behaviors can impact our mood. And sometimes in a way that maybe spirals downwards if our thoughts are certainly negative, if our behaviors maybe look a certain way, if our emotions look a certain way, that can lead to this spiral downwards. Let's look at a few examples. Thoughts. If we look at this list and just read a couple of them, I am a freak. I will be a burden to others. Am I going to have a seizure today? I've lost my independence. I will never be able to live alone. Life is unfair. It's no use to try. I am a coward. I am ugly. Everything bad always happens to me. Oh, how do we feel after that? Kind of depressing. And these thoughts, thoughts are one of those things where they just kind of play automatically. And, I often like to think about it back in the day when we had tape players. There's sort of this repeating tape player that just plays on in our head. And we don't know exactly where they came from. Sometimes these might be messages we've heard before. Maybe we grew up in a family where there was a little bit more negativity or hostility or people who weren't that kind. And we recorded those messages and they play again and again. It may have been more implicit. Maybe just as somebody picked it up, you just picked up some of these ideas that I'm different, I'm not lovable, someone rejected me. And so these thoughts can just play on repeat and they really have a profound impact on how we feel. And so it can be important just to notice, what are those thoughts that are replaying in my mind? Where did they come from? Are they actually true? Is it true that there's no love in the world? It can certainly feel that way sometimes, but is that true all the time? So it's helpful to take a look at these thoughts and explore them. We also know that there are certain categories of these thoughts that maybe people might have a tendency, especially people who are depressed or anxious, to have a tendency to have certain thoughts. Mind reading, for example, is one of these categories where maybe I'm looking at your boxes, in the Zoom boxes, and kind of look confused. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you're not really, this doesn't fit. You don't like this at all. You don't like me. And I can think all kinds of things, but that's mind reading, this tendency. And we all do it. If we text a friend, they don't text us back. We think, well, they don't like me. They don't want to talk. They're too busy for me. There's this tendency that many people, I would say all of us have some of the time, but we know in depression and anxiety, it's a little bit more extreme, happens a little bit more often. The negative filter, ignoring the positive, is, let's say you went out for a walk with a friend and maybe you tripped a little bit, had a funny trip. And you just remember that negative moment where you were kind of embarrassed and, oh my gosh, I'm so clumsy. And, that was so silly. I fell down and I, so embarrassed. But you don't remember the whole story, that it was really a nice walk. It was really a nice day. And so there's that negative filter. There's a highlighting or a focus, over focus perhaps on some of those negative events. So these are these cognitive tendencies that we have. Versus, and I would say some people, it takes some practice to really, think about or have these thoughts that don't come so automatically. It's almost like a muscle, that needs to be strengthened. But thoughts like, the weather is great today. We're lucky to be living in California where the weather is often quite great. I will learn to find a way. I'll just take it one day at a time, one step at a time. It's going to take time to learn. I'm fighting this. I'm considerate of others. Let me listen to my body. I'm doing the best I can. This kind of compassionate view, or this reminder of, I really am trying hard to kind of be your own best friend. Sometimes we're so hard on ourselves and these negative critical thoughts are there. But if we can rewind that tape, and then re-record some of these new thoughts, new reminders, and I'm really trying my best, that can be helpful and can help us be motivated to keep moving forward. So that's the cognitive part of CBT. We know that the thoughts, behaviors, and social behaviors influence our mood. So let's take a look at an example. Let's say I had $20 in my pocket back when we still carried cash. And I was walking around and I lost it. I come home, oh my gosh, it's gone. And I can think to myself, oh my gosh, why am I always losing things? I can't do anything right. I can't even keep money in my pocket. And I can berate myself. And you can imagine sort of that downward spiral that would send me in, probably affecting the rest of my day, the rest of my weekend. Versus the same situation where maybe instead I think to myself, well, maybe someone who needed it picked it up. They probably need it more than I do right now. Maybe we'll go and, enjoy it. And that thought, in a way, stops that negative cycle and allows me to kind of move on from my day and just be okay with it, forgive myself, and move on. Another example where thoughts, behaviors, and social behaviors can affect our mood. Maybe I woke up today I'm just feeling kind of lonely. It's a beautiful weekend and I don't really have anyone to see. I can think to myself, well, it's because no one likes me. Nothing will ever go right for me. I'm going to be alone forever. We can imagine the spiral downwards. Or we can think of it in a different way and say, well, you know, this world can be a lonely place for anyone. And that's true. A lot of people are feeling isolated. We talk about this pandemic of isolation and loneliness. But I know that friends are good medicine. Maybe I should reach out to someone. I bet it's been hard for them too, especially during COVID. We all know our social circles, whatever they were before, have just gotten so much smaller and smaller over time. So again, these thoughts really can impact our mood. And so paying attention to those thoughts, being aware of them, can have a large impact on us and our mood. So situation leads to thoughts, leads to certain behaviors, and can affect our mood. Let's look at some of the behaviors, some of the things that we do and how they impact our mood. Maybe I woke up this morning and I was feeling anxious about going out to meet my friend. I can have the thoughts, or I can have the behavior, sorry, just stay in bed. I don't want to meet them. Go back to sleep. I wake up late. Oh my gosh, it's too late. I can't do the thing. It's already, 10 minutes past when we were supposed to meet. I text to cancel at the last minute. I feel guilty. And I think to myself, I'm a bad friend. These behaviors can impact our later mood. How we respond to a certain situation can impact our mood. Versus, let's say I woke up, I'm still feeling anxious about going to meet my friend. But maybe I think about what would help me wake up and maybe calm down a little bit. Maybe I can go open my window, make myself a nice cup of coffee, maybe wear my favorite shirt that I always get lots of compliments on. Maybe I feel a little bit more confident. So kind of that spiraling upwards instead. There's sort of this tendency we're kind of pushing in the other direction. And we can imagine the difference that it's going to lead to. We know that with anxiety too. I'll just make a quick comment. With anxiety too, often one of the things that sustains anxiety is avoidance, meaning we avoid that thing that's going to stress us out. And we know that in the short term, it does make us feel better to avoid, to say, okay, I'm not going to meet my friend. I'm just going to go back to sleep. But in the long run, I end up oversleeping. I end up having to cancel. I end up feeling like a bad friend. In the long run, that avoidance maybe does more harm over time. Versus the opposite of avoidance is approach. Even though that thing's going to be a little bit nerve-wracking, but I'm going to try anyway. I'm going to take some steps that can lead me to approach, go a little bit closer. And we know that that actually seems to be a more adaptive coping strategy in the face of anxiety. Some of the other behaviors, social behaviors, specifically focused on improving relationships. Maybe arranging to see a friend where you can talk openly, letting a family member know that you appreciate their support, just calling someone to talk. Tell a friend how much you enjoy getting together, talk to a family or member or friend about something that's been on your mind. Enrolling in a new class or activity where you can meet other people. Now, as things seem to maybe be opening up, maybe there's more options outdoors, perhaps, to do something, learn a new skill. Go to an event or place where you can meet others, arrange a get together with someone you've lost touch with. I know people have been talking about this during COVID, and I see this as a real adaptation that people have been naturally engaging in is during COVID when our social circles really just got smaller and smaller, reaching out to those old people from way back in the day, that old high school friend. I wonder how they're doing, how are they managing all of this? But just reaching out to people and being proactive about nurturing some of these relationships, or maybe even fostering some new ones. Other ideas that maybe come to mind. So let's think about the way social behaviors may impact. I had a seizure while I was walking out on a walk with my mom. It was unexpected. One of the thoughts can be, I can't control myself. I'm so embarrassed. I look like a fool. Go to bed, cry. And then I don't want to talk to anyone. I hide away. And maybe when my mom comes to check in on me, I just blow up at her. I'm just angry and frustrated and mad at the world. So that's one scenario and one way a situation can lead to certain thoughts, behaviors, and social behaviors. But if we maybe think about it a different way, wow, that came out of the blue. I'm still learning. I'm so glad I was with my mom then. I'm grateful for the people in my life. It can maybe lead to certain different behaviors. I wonder if there were some triggers from today. It was a stressful morning. Wow, I've had a really rough day. Maybe it's a good day to go get some ice cream. and social behaviors. I should see if mom wants to join me. Maybe we can watch that Netflix show together. It's a good day to just take a break. Today I'm just gonna veg out and just enjoy some time inside and just relax a little bit. And so we can see again, the same situation, but certain thoughts, certain behaviors, certain social behaviors can lead to that spiraling downward. We can imagine in that first scenario how one might feel at the end of the day versus this sort of other option and other scenario. So just keeping in mind that we think of every thought, every behavior, every social behavior as sort of in our control and leading to a different outcome as we move forward. All right, so just a summary of the things you probably are very well familiar with by now. Certain situations lead to certain thoughts and leads to certain behaviors and lead to certain emotions. I want to end with a mindfulness exercise, but that's a way when we can change our emotions. We've talked about changing thoughts. We've talked about changing certain behaviors. We've talked about that domino effect that each of these thoughts, each of these behaviors can have. I'll end with emotions, but one of the ways we can sort of change or foster different emotions is through some mindfulness exercises or some deep breathing. And I'll end with one today, but just ways to just relax a bit. Maybe you are at a time when you are feeling really tense. A lot of things stressful things have been going on, but there are ways to maybe calm down a bit or just kind of recenter yourself. So we'll end with that. But I wanted to just talk about something we're all experiencing. COVID-19, we're stuck at home, we're isolated, we're tired of Zoom, but yet here we are again on yet another Zoom call. And maybe we have certain thoughts, but maybe this time, maybe some helpful thoughts. COVID has made it so hard for everyone these days. Maybe certain behaviors, maybe there are things you can do today. What are some things you enjoy? Maybe something you haven't done in a while. Maybe spending some time reading that book that's been collecting dust on your bookshelf. Maybe trying to cook something new, maybe calling a friend. I know someone who's gotten into writing letters during COVID. They have pen pals now. So, finding something that sort of maybe you wouldn't normally do, but trying it again. Maybe practicing a new skill, not in that productivity way that you have to write that great American novel, but maybe you want to write a poem. Maybe you want to practice a few chords on that guitar for no one else to hear but yourself. Maybe you do want to get a little bit better at that skill and doing a little bit of these things that you enjoy. And emotions. After we do these things, we know that we feel satisfied, energized, we feel a little bit better, and just thinking about that spiral upwards. So our thoughts, our behaviors, our emotions, even though we're all facing the same situation, can definitely change the way that we feel and kind of contribute to this downward spiral or contribute to this more upward spiral. And another thing that I think a lot of people have just been helpful to remember is we're all doing the best we can. No one's doing this perfectly. COVID has been hard. We're all kind of, trying it out and messing up as we go, but we're still doing the best that we can. And I think that's a reality during COVID. It's probably just a reality during life as well. All right, I just wanted to end too, with CBT, we know that these behaviors, these thoughts, these behaviors, these emotions, like a mindfulness exercise, can also change the brain. And so there's some good evidence, fMRI data, some really nice data showing that, there can be larger long-term impacts of CBT for depression and anxiety, and we see them physically too in the brain. So just some extra encouragement to engage in some of these. So hopefully we talked about depression and anxiety, a little bit more about what those look like. We talked about CBT, you have a better sense of those thoughts, behaviors, and emotions and the way those can impact our larger mood. And we'll end with questions, but maybe before we do that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. What I'd like to do is just end with a brief mindfulness exercise. Is everyone okay with that? Just trying that out? Okay. So I'll just ask you to get comfortable wherever you are, and we'll just spend the next 5 minutes or so on this brief mindfulness exercise. To begin this practice, let yourself be in a relaxed and comfortable position. We're going to do the practice of cultivating positive emotion. In this case, loving kindness, which is the desire for someone to be happy or yourself to be happy. It's not dependent on something. It's not conditional. It's just a natural opening of the heart to someone else or to yourself So just check into your body and notice how you're feeling right now. Letting whatever is there just be there. And now let yourself bring to mind someone whom, the moment you think of them, you feel happy. See if you can bring to mind this person. It could be a relative, a close friend, someone with whom you have a not too complicated relationship. Just a general sense that when you think of them, you feel happy. You can pick a child. You can always choose a pet, a dog or a cat. A creature is fairly easy to feel love for. So let them come to mind and just have a sense of them being in front of you. You can feel them, sense them, see them. And as you imagine them, notice how you're feeling inside. Maybe you feel some warmth, or there's some heat to your face, a smile, a sense of expansiveness. This is loving kindness. This is a natural feeling that's accessible to all of us at any moment. So now, having this loved one in front of you, begin to wish them well. May you be safe and protected from danger. May you be happy and peaceful. May you be healthy and strong. May you have ease and well-being. And as I say these words, you can use my words or your own words and have a sense of loving kindness come from you, emanate from you, and begin to touch this loved one, reaching out. You might have a sense of color or light, or you might just have a feeling, a warmth. May you be free from stress and anxiety. May you be free from all fear. I encourage you to say whatever feels meaningful to you. And as you're sending these words and feelings of loving kindness, also check into yourself and see how you're feeling inside. And now imagine that this loved one turns around and begins to send it back to you. So see if you can receive the loving kindness. Take it in. And they're wishing you well. May you be happy, meaning you. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be safe and protected from all danger. May you have joy, well-being, letting yourself take it in. And if you're not feeling anything at this point, it's not a problem. This is a practice that plants seeds, takes time. And if you're feeling something other than loving kindness, just check into that. Notice what you're feeling. There may be something to learn here. So see if you can send this loving kindness to yourself. You can imagine it coming down from your body, from your heart. You can just have a sense of it. May I be safe and protected from danger. May I be healthy and strong. May I be happy and peaceful. May I accept myself just as I am. May I have meaningful work, a joyful life, close friends and family. And now, just checking into yourself, noticing what it is you feel as you do this, see what arises, and offer that to yourself. And now, bringing this practice to a close, just come back again to extend this loving kindness to yourself, sitting for a while and basking in the energy of loving kindness that has been generated here. All right, we'll end that here. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah.
That was wonderful. We have a question Is it possible that the anxiety comes from the epilepsy itself?
No, I'm
Christy's
not.
asking that question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not an expert on that. My understanding is that there are some, common pathways that maybe predispose people to depression and anxiety, but I wouldn't know specifically what that is. Yeah.
Just definitely, the journey of living with epilepsy brings a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns, and that by itself creates a certain level of anxiety. But I couldn't say that epilepsy itself creates anxiety. I mean, we all know how complex our brains are and how we react to our bodies and how our bodies behave. So I have never heard of it specifically saying that epilepsy creates anxiety. I think it's the surroundings, the social impact, and the life-changing impact that epilepsy has in your life that creates many times anxiety.
Nancy, will you be kind enough to do this morning meditation that you just did for us every day for me? I'd really appreciate it.
I agree.
I can send you there's a link. The UCLA has a mindfulness center that has these. You can actually download them to your phone and listen to them. So I will not, unfortunately, but this other person will.
Okay, that was very, very nice. I appreciate that.
Thanks for saying that.
Christy, would you like to ask the question? I know you're clarifying a little bit. Can I unmute you and maybe you can ask Dr. Liu the question yourself?
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm on my phone on Zoom, which is a challenge in and of itself. So my apologies for that. My question, so it's not me that has epilepsy, it's my daughter who's now 18. And I note, she has pretty severe anxiety. And I note that, like you were saying on the thoughts part, that she'll go to that sort of negative, everybody hates me, nobody likes me, I'm the worst, I'm, all of those things. Is that a learned behavior? And is that something that with work she can change about herself? Or is that something that's physiologically part of the brain and her structure? And I guess it's kind of along the lines of the question that was just asked, does epilepsy cause this? I know, usually when I ask questions like this or of a doctor, the answer is usually we don't know. But I thought maybe somebody here might know. Thank you.
Alicia, is that a hand raised? Okay.
Yes. I've been there. I had suicidal tendencies. It was really rough, especially as a teenager when your hormones are going insane. And somebody told me something that stuck with me that said, your first thought is what you're conditioned to think. Your second thought is who you really are. So if you can catch yourself when you start having those, nobody loves me, and say, okay, hang on. Obviously somebody loves me. I have a roof over my head. That second thought can really help you to find that worth. I just wanted to add that.
That's a great point, Alicia. And I do think, in some ways it's, I do think it's changeable. I think maybe that gets, at the core of your question is it changeable? But it takes work. It's not, it's one of those things that other people will say, it was so easy for me. Why don't you just do it? And it's not that easy. And I think that's the reality, is we don't know. And sometimes people's experiences, do contribute to that belief. And maybe there's a reason why that belief, made sense in some places, but isn't true all the time. So I think that's one thing to keep in mind. I do think it just takes a lot of time, and ideally working with someone who can help them sort of slowly change that. But it is sort of a delicate balance. It's not just change that thought, but it really is slowly thinking about where does that come from, and why might that be there, and when is that true, when does that not true. Another thing I'll add too is we know that when our brains and our bodies are under stress, we do go to a very black and white thinking, that there is this tendency to be very all or nothing that we know is associated with depression and anxiety, but we know that stress contributes to that. And so part of the goal is to see a little bit more of the gradient, to have a little bit more gray, and to also see the times when actually, you know, you are lovable or people do like you, you know, but it's slowly, it takes time. And I do think of it as building a muscle that's very weak. There's an automatic sort of negative reaction, and we want to slowly build up that more helpful and adaptive version.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Great question.
Hailey has a question. Thank you, Christy. Thank you, Nancy. Hailey had a question. I have heard depression not as a feeling of sadness, but as a lack of emotion entirely. What are your thoughts on these?
Yes, definitely. So that flat affect, we call it, where there really is, you know, these negative symptoms, the absence of some of the mood. I think that's very common in depression. And I do think one of the things we know that really helps with a depression that looks like that is to start doing things. We call it behavioral activation, but to start engaging in those things that, yes, you're right, you know, they're not things you enjoy right now, but we think of it as kind of starting a car battery, you know, that we probably all had to do when we weren't driving our cars for a while. But, you know, kind of giving that extra jolt or shock of electricity just to be able to get the battery, you know, built up again. But yes, that flatness is very common in depression. And one of the things that we know can be helpful, in addition to, you know, antidepressants can be very helpful for many people, but is also, you know, just trying to engage in those activities, even if you don't feel like it, you know, sometimes the act of doing them helps to build that battery so that the car can run again. But it's very common, unfortunately.
I have a question for you, Nancy. So, you know, anxiety, isolation has been two words that we hear again and again and again in the last year. Can you talk a little bit how connecting with a community, like support group, mentor, can help with some of these challenges?
Yeah, you know, and I'll say too, I think a lot of people are really struggling with isolation. I can imagine, you know, with epilepsy, it probably adds another layer of complexity to that, but it's very common. And we know that, you know, people are medicine, can be medicine. People can be bad medicine too. So, you know, not all people are better. So you really have to find the right people, the safe people, and identify some of those folks. But I think it's again like that car battery idea, that if you feel isolated and the more you are alone, the more isolated you're going to feel. And, you know, I like to think of that spiral as always moving either upward or downward. You know, it's just sort of everything you're doing kind of contributes to that. And so if you're going to stay isolated, you know, you might feel more and more isolated and feel like there really is nobody around. But taking those small steps, and I really emphasize small steps, because again, we can always say, why don't you just blah, blah, blah. But, you know, I think the reality is if you're feeling depressed and anxious, you don't want to do, you have no motivation to do those things. So finding really simple ways, you know, texting a friend, you know, reaching out to that one safe person, you know, having a 10-minute call, you know, really starting very small can be helpful. You know, I think mentors, a support person, I think all of those things definitely can be helpful. Someone who understands that experience, but I think really being mindful of those safe people, those trusted people, and starting there. And, you know, I think as for loved ones, caregivers too, not to be too pushy, you know, kind of give people the space to, you know, go at their pace.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
One more comment, Nancy, and I'd like you to comment on it. You know, quite often I'll hear from somebody and they'll say, I'm depressed. But also I think sometimes people they don't realize that maybe they're just having some moments of sadness, and that really clinical depression is really when you're in a hole and you're trying to get out, but you can't get out, and your whole world is caving in on you. And you, my grandmother had some very serious deep depression, and she would have to be hospitalized during it. And you know, it's not something that people can just snap out of.
Yeah.
And there's, I think there's, you know, people are going to have their ups and downs and have the blues and be sad, and that's normal part of life. And I think that you have to kind of sometimes keep in mind that this too shall pass. Maybe you can comment a little bit about on how people sometimes just go, I'm depressed, when they may be just having the blues or some sadness that isn't going to be. I think you said that it takes at least 2 days maybe of consistency to really be in a depression.
Yeah, and actually 2 weeks, so even longer. Yeah, so and depression and anxiety, that there really is this extended period and a marked shift from where someone was before. But yeah, I think that's where people being really open about their own sort of down moods or feeling anxious. And I think COVID fortunately has opened that up a lot. People are talking about that a lot more. But yes, this idea that we are just our day to day, even during today, your mood will probably fluctuate up and down, and much more so in the course of a week or longer. So those fluctuations are normal. It just happens. You know, sometimes you do just wake up on the wrong side of the bed and you're not feeling so great. So depression really is an extended period, and really we talked about that emphasis on functioning. It's like you can't do anything, and people really are incapacitated by that. And so that's when professional help really is helpful. But if we have those dips, I think it's just normal to remember, you know, it may be just a dip. You know, we're all going to have them occasionally, and that happens. And also, what can I do that'll help me feel better? And I think that's the core part of CBT that's useful for everybody is, okay, today I woke up, I really don't want to see anybody, I really don't want to do anything, I just want to lie in bed. But knowing if I stay in bed all day, I'm probably going to feel worse afterwards. So there are these things that we can do that can help us feel a little bit better. And I think being mindful of some of those things, using those can be helpful too. And, you know, just remembering everybody, especially during these days, are going to feel a little bit depressed here and there, and that's normal.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Well, thank you so much.
I'm sorry. Yeah, hi, Carlos. So I do have a question for Nancy. How do we get in touch with you, or you know, if you do have questions, or you want to, just send you an email about your presentation? Are you open to connecting with us?
Yeah, well, you know, I would say if you need any, looking for more professional help, definitely, you know, talk to your physician and they can get you connected to any kind of more professional help. But any sort of more simple questions that we didn't get to today, you're welcome to email me. Or maybe I'll just put my email in the chat or give it to Carlos. Carlos has it. Feel free
to yeah.
An email would be fine. Yeah.
You guys can reach us out at EFNCA@epilepsynorcal.org. Let me put it on the chat room. And we'll route the questions to Nancy. EFNC@epilepsynorcal.org. Send us an email, and I'll route it through Nancy. We also, you guys can call us. Our phone number 510-922-8687.
Okay. So EFNCA, is that your email, Carlos?
Yes, the foundation generic email. And we will run the email through Nancy.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, I definitely would love to get connected. So I'm gonna, what's your phone number again? I didn't see that in the chat.
Yeah, let me put it there. There it is.
All right.
And remember, you can always have all that information on our website at
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you so much, Nancy. This was very valuable. This is my first time to attend the presentation, and I've heard about cognitive behavioral therapy because I'm in the wellness coach, actually.
Oh, great. Okay, wonderful. Yes, it's used in a lot of places. So.
Yes, definitely. So thank you so much. And also Carlos for hosting the webinar.
Thank you for coming. I really appreciate you guys taking the initiative, the to educate yourself and attend some of these educational seminars. I think it's very important that you take leadership in your journey. And we all know it's not easy, but you got to take leadership in combination with your health provider and open up to some of the resources that we have here at the foundation. Christine was asking if there were services in Citrus Heights. So right now we are operating 100% virtually. We don't really have a physical office. So our support groups that occur virtually. We have an adult support group that meets twice a month, every other week. We have a caregiver support group, and we have a Spanish-speaking support group. What I will invite you to visit our website, epilepsynorcal.org, and there under programs, there's actually a banner. You can see all the different programs and events and therapy programs that we have scheduled through the year. And we're adding new therapy programs all the time. We have 3 new therapy programs coming this year. And I would love you guys to check it out. Give us a call, and you can register via phone call or email or the website. But we have three new therapy programs this year. One based on depression, one based on memory, and then another one based on self-management of epilepsy. So check out our website. We'll be opening these programs in the next 2 or 3 months. So
Thanks again, everybody, for joining us, and really appreciate your time, Nancy, and your presentation was very, very well done.
Thank you, Nancy. That was awesome. Thank you, everybody, for attending. If anybody, again, we're here. Give us a call. Send us an email. We'll try to help in any way we can. So.
Okay, thank you so much, guys. Bye, everyone.
Have a good weekend.